When you think about the scariest players in NHL history, you probably imagine tough guys who threw punches and delivered bone-crushing hits. But what made these players truly terrifying wasn't just their aggression on the ice. It was the dangerous legacy they left behind and the tragic consequences that followed them long after their careers ended. Bob Probert was the king of enforcers, a player who struck fear into opponents across the league. Playing for the Detroit Red Wings, he teamed up with Joey Cusser to form the notorious Bruise Brothers, a duo that defined physical hockey in the 1980s and 1990s. The culture of that era offered no real checks and balances on players, allowing teams and the league to turn a blind eye to personal problems. This environment created the perfect storm for Probert's downfall. Probert wasn't just a one-trick pony, though. In his best season, he racked up 398 penalty minutes, the sixth highest single-season total in NHL history, while also scoring 62 points and earning his only All-Star selection. This dual-threat ability made him a rare commodity among enforcers. He finished his career with 3,300 penalty minutes, placing him fourth on the NHL's all-time list. But behind this tough guy image was a man struggling with serious personal demons that the hockey world chose to ignore. Probert's off-ice life was a mess of legal troubles and substance abuse that eventually destroyed him. In 1989, his career hit a wall when customs agents found cocaine in his possession at the Detroit-Windsor border. This led to a 3-month prison sentence and an indefinite suspension from the NHL. The incident should have been a wake-up call, but the system failed him. 5 years later, a motorcycle crash revealed he had a blood alcohol level 3 times the legal limit, along with traces of cocaine in his system. Those who knew him personally described a quiet and gentle man, completely different from his on-ice persona. The contrast between his public and private life showed how the enforcer role consumed him. The most tragic part of Probert's story came after his death in 2010 at just 45 years old from heart failure. Before he died, he had donated his brain for research because he knew the fierce pounding he gave and received was taking its toll. This decision showed remarkable self-awareness about the price he was paying for his career. Researchers at Boston University later diagnosed him with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a devastating brain disease caused by repeated head trauma. His wife believed the damage came not just from his 246 career fights, but from all the checking and hits throughout his career. Probert's diagnosis became part of a national conversation about the long-term consequences of fighting careers. His legacy transformed from that of a beloved hockey icon to a heartbreaking cautionary tale about the hidden costs of hockey's most physical roles. Zdeno Chara was a different kind of scary. Standing at 6 feet 9 inches tall, he holds the record as the tallest player in NHL history. His intimidation wasn't about fighting, though he could handle himself when needed. Instead, Chara used his massive size and reach to become a shutdown defenseman who took no prisoners. He made it nearly impossible for opponents to get time and space in his defensive zone. What made Chara particularly frightening was how he transformed his natural disadvantages into weapons. When Chara first entered the NHL, he was described as a gangly, awkward skater whose future as an elite player was far from guaranteed. But through sheer determination and relentless work ethic, he molded himself into an indomitable force. His strategic physicality went beyond just being tall. He used his immense frame to control the defensive zone with surgical precision, making every shift a nightmare for opposing forwards who found themselves constantly battling for position against an unmovable object. Chara's physical presence extended to his offensive game as well. His booming slap shot became legendary when he set the NHL record with a 108.8 mile-per-hour blast at the 2012 All-Star Game, the fastest shot in league history. This combination of defensive authority and offensive firepower made him a complete player who dominated both ends of the ice. He won the Norris Trophy in 2009 and was a finalist 5 other times, proving his sustained excellence over more than a decade. The most impressive aspect of Chara's career was his leadership. He captained the Boston Bruins to a Stanley Cup victory in 2011 and won the Mark Messier Leadership Award that same year. By the time he retired after the 2021-22 season, he had set a significant historical benchmark as the all-time leader in games played by a defenseman with 1,680 games. His longevity became almost as intimidating as his physical presence, as opponents knew they would face this mountain of a man year after year with no signs of him slowing down. Now here's where you should hit that subscribe button and drop a comment about which of these players you think was the most intimidating and why. Your thoughts help shape future videos about hockey's most compelling stories. Chris Pronger was perhaps the most dangerous player on this list because he combined elite skill with controversial, boundary-pushing aggression. He won both the Norris Trophy and Hart Memorial Trophy in 2000, a rare feat for any defenseman that showcased his incredible two-way ability. Pronger was a heavy hitter who could generate high offensive output while serving as a team leader, making him one of the most complete players of his generation. But this elite status came with a dark side that made him truly terrifying to face. Pronger's reputation as a punishing, aggressive player came with a disturbing pattern of disciplinary issues that followed him throughout his career. The NHL suspended him 8 times for various incidents, revealing a player who consistently pushed the boundaries of acceptable play. His approach to the game seemed calculated to inflict maximum damage while staying just within the rules, making every shift dangerous for his opponents. During the 2007 Stanley Cup playoffs alone, Pronger's aggressive tendencies were on full display. He received back-to-back suspensions that showed his complete disregard for player safety when the stakes were highest. First came a suspension for a check to the head of Detroit's Thomas Holmstrom during the conference finals. Instead of learning from this incident, he followed it up with an elbow to the head of Ottawa's Dean McCammond in the following round, earning another suspension. His most infamous moment came in 2008 when he received an 8-game suspension for an unnecessary stomp on Vancouver's Ryan Kessler while he was lying helplessly on the ice. The severity of this incident led critics to argue the punishment was too light, especially considering that another player, Chris Simon, had received a 30-game suspension for a similar stomp earlier that season. Many believed Pronger received preferential treatment because of his recent MVP award and status as a key ambassador for the game. This double standard made his dangerous play even more troubling. The ultimate irony of Pronger's career is how it ended and what came after. His aggressive style eventually caught up with him when post-concussion syndrome and vision problems forced him to retire prematurely in 2011. The very physicality that defined his game became the thing that destroyed it. In a twist that nobody saw coming, the player who spent years battling the league's disciplinary system was later hired to work for the NHL's player safety division. This career shift created a profound paradox, where the player whose aggressive style was often seen as a problem for the league became responsible for enforcing rules designed to protect players from the trauma that ended his own career. Scott Stevens was the human wrecking ball, a master of the open ice hit who led the New Jersey Devils to 3 Stanley Cup championships and earned recognition as one of the 100 greatest NHL players. His punishing physical style was a cornerstone of the Devils' defensive system, but what made him truly terrifying was how he turned violence into an art form. Stevens built his reputation on a handful of signature hits that became iconic moments in hockey history, though their legacy has been completely transformed by our modern understanding of head trauma. 2 hits stand out above all others as defining moments of Stevens' career and symbols of hockey's dangerous past. In the 2003 Stanley Cup final, he delivered an unpenalized late hit on Anaheim's Paul Kariya that left the speedy winger motionless on the ice for several minutes. The crowd fell silent as medical staff attended to Kariya, who appeared to be seriously injured. What happened next became one of hockey's most celebrated yet troubling moments. Incredibly, Kariya returned just 4 minutes later to score a goal, a moment that was widely praised at the time as heroic but is now viewed as medical malpractice. Even more famous and devastating was Stevens' hit on Eric Lindros in Game 7 of the 2000 Eastern Conference Final. That anvil-like shoulder delivered directly to the chin gave Lindros his 6th concussion in just 2 years and is widely credited with cutting short what should have been a Hall of Fame career. The hit left Lindros unconscious on the ice and changed the trajectory of his entire life, not just his hockey career. The long-term effects of this single moment of violence rippled through years of Lindros' life afterward. At the time these incidents occurred, Stevens' hits were celebrated as clean checks and defensive art forms that fell within the accepted rules and cultural norms of the game. The responsibility for injuries was typically placed on the player being hit, who was expected to keep his head up and protect himself. This victim-blaming mentality allowed players like Stevens to operate with impunity, knowing that the culture would support their most violent actions as long as they stayed within the technical rules. But our understanding and perception of these moments has changed dramatically over the past 2 decades. With modern knowledge about head trauma, concussions, and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, these once celebrated highlights are now viewed as travesties and prime examples of the absolute recklessness that defined the old NHL. The decision to allow a clearly concussed player like Kariya to return to the game is now seen as dangerous and irresponsible rather than heroic. Stevens' hits serve as a stark historical benchmark that illustrates how far the sport has come in prioritizing player safety. They represent the ultimate expression of an era where brutal physicality was revered and celebrated instead of questioned and regulated. His legacy is now being reframed not just as that of a legendary defensive player, but as a symbol of the seismic shift in hockey's cultural values from a game that celebrated punishing hits to one where player safety has become the paramount concern. The transformation of how we view Stevens' career reflects the sport's broader reckoning with its violent past. What once made him seem like the perfect hockey player now makes him a reminder of everything wrong with hockey's old-school mentality. His most famous moments have become teaching tools about the dangers of head trauma rather than highlights to be celebrated. These 4 players represent different approaches to intimidation, but they share a common thread that connects all their stories. Their physical styles are now directly linked to modern conversations about player health and head trauma that have fundamentally changed how we understand the sport. Each player's story serves as evidence of the long-term costs that physical hockey careers can exact on the human body and mind. Probert's posthumous chronic traumatic encephalopathy diagnosis, Pronger's players' career-ending concussions and vision problems, and the devastating long-term effects of hits delivered by Stevens all provide undeniable evidence of the true price of a physical hockey career. Their stories aren't just historical records of a bygone era filled with tough guys and enforcers. They're powerful symbols of hockey's complex evolution as the sport continues working to balance its traditional physical elements with a growing understanding of player safety and long-term health consequences. The legacy of these players forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about hockey's past, while offering hope for a safer future. Their stories remind us that the sport's most celebrated traditions often came at a terrible human cost that was hidden from public view for decades. As hockey continues evolving toward better protection for its players, these four men serve as both warnings about the dangers of unchecked aggression and proof that the sport can change for the better when it prioritizes player welfare over entertainment value.